Now, like I said before, there are other elasticities aside from price elasticity of demand, but the general things that we talked about regarding price elasticity of demand hold for all of these other elasticities. For example, we can have the price elasticity of supply, which just measures how responsive quantity supplied is to price. In that way, it's an exact analog of price elasticity of demand. Note here that it's unnecessary to take the absolute value as we did with price elasticity of demand, because quantity supplied and price will always move in the same direction since supply curves slope upwards, and we will in fact automatically get a positive quantity here. We can also talk about the income elasticity of demand. Here, rather than talking about how responsive quantity demanded is to the item's price, we can talk about how responsive quantity demanded is to a change in income. And we'll see here that income elasticity of demand is just the percent change in the quantity demanded for an item divided by the percent change in the market's income. Here, again, we don't take the absolute value because in this case, this quantity could be positive, negative, or zero, but knowing the sign that this takes actually conveys information about the relationship between income and quantity demanded. We said before that income was one of the determinants of demand, and we said that goods could go into one of two categories. Either we have normal goods, those goods where as your income rises you demand more of them, or we could have inferior goods, which are those goods where you actually demand less of the item as your income increases. And vice versa, you would actually demand more of the item as your income decreases. Now let's think about what implication that has for this quantity here. For normal goods, income and quantity demanded move in the same direction. Either income goes up and demand goes up, or income goes down and demand goes down. So we're either going to be dividing two positive numbers here, or two negative numbers, and we're going to get an elasticity that is greater than zero. So we can say that if our income elasticity of demand is greater than zero, we're looking at a normal good. On the other hand, if we have an inferior good, the numerator and denominator of our fraction move in opposite directions. Either our income is going up and our quantity demanded is going down, meaning we have a positive here and a negative here, or our income is going down and our quantity demanded is going up, which means we have a negative here and a positive here. Either way, when we divide those numbers, we're going to get a number that's less than zero. So we can say that if we get an income elasticity of demand that's less than zero, we know that we're dealing with an inferior good. Now this just highlights why we don't automatically take the absolute value of this quantity, because knowing whether this number is negative or positive gives us information on what type of good it is that we're dealing with. Now we could potentially have a good that is neither normal nor inferior. That would imply that the responsiveness of quantity demanded to changes in income is just zero. Lastly, we have what we call the cross-price elasticity of demand. Now here, rather than talking about just one good, we're talking about the responsiveness in terms of demand of one good to changes in price of another good. So say we have two goods A and B here, we define the cross-price elasticity of demand as the percentage change in the quantity demanded of the second guy, or good B, in response to a percentage change in the price of good A. So to put this in more concrete terms, let's think about, for example, Coca-Cola and Pepsi. This cross-price elasticity could represent, well, what is the percent change in the quantity demanded of Pepsi for a given increase in the price of Coca-Cola? Again, when we talked about the determinants of demand, we said that one of the determinants of demand was the prices of related goods. So let's see how that factors into our cross-price elasticity of demand here. So if we have substitute goods, so that those are one where you use one good instead of the other. So in that sense, say, well, a rise in the price of one good is going to lead to an increase in demand for the substitute good. So this is our Coke and Pepsi example that we just talked about, that a positive move in the price of Coca-Cola is going to result in a positive move in the quantity demanded of Pepsi, and vice versa. So here we're either going to see two positive numbers or two negative numbers, and this ratio is going to give us a positive number. So we can say if our cross price elasticity is greater than 0, we know that we're dealing with two products that are substitutes. On the other hand, if we're talking about complements, such as DVD players and DVDs, say, well, an increase in the price of DVD players is going to lead to a decrease in the quantity demanded of DVDs, and vice versa. So when we're dealing with complements, these two quantities move in opposite directions. And we say we're either going to get a positive price change for one of them and a negative quantity change for the other, or we could see, for example, a decrease in the price of DVD players and a positive change in quantity demanded for DVDs. Either way, when we divide the two, we're going to get a negative number. So we can say that if our cross-price elasticity is less than 0, we know that we're dealing with two goods that are complements. So again, the sign of this conveys useful information about what the two goods that we're looking at actually look like. In general, you can compute a whole host of different types of elasticities if you notice the general patterns. What you'll see here when we talk about price elasticity of supply, well, the quantity supplied goes in the numerator of our elasticity, and the price goes in the denominator. So we can figure out how to calculate any of these elasticities by just knowing what it is that they're called. Here, the same works in that when we have income elasticity of demand, well, then we know that our demand goes in our numerator and our income goes in the denominator. So you can calculate a whole number of measures in this way.